The estate shimmered like a dream bought with old money. Golden light spilled over manicured hedges, as if the sun itself had RSVP'd. White roses marched down the stone paths, and chandeliers swung lazily from ancient oaks, glamour blooming from bark. The air smelled like money and mild arrogance. Guests floated through the garden in silks and silvers, their laughter crisp, their champagne bottomless. At the heart of it all stood Olivia Montgomery, society's crowned darling, and Michael Carter, the man whose ambition had rewritten his bloodline. But as cameras clicked and flutes clinked, something colder crept in. A black sedan purred to a stop, and from it emerged Evelyn Carter, Michael's grandmother, not just a guest, a pillar. Her silver curls kissed her temples, and the deep navy of her dress said more than diamonds could. She didn't walk. She glided like grace itself had shown up uninvited, but the Montgomerys barely blinked. Victoria, the mother of the bride, watched Evelyn with tight lips and a sharper gaze, her wine glass tilted like a weapon. Then, with the cruelty of someone who's never had to apologize, she leaned in and whispered to a cousin. And thus the war beneath the wedding began. There's a line between elegance and arrogance, and someone had crossed it in patent leather shoes. A ripple of laughter followed a veiled insult. Evelyn heard it as clear as a bell. But flinch? No, ma'am. Evelyn Carter didn't flinch. She endured. Richard Montgomery, head of the estate, gave her a nod colder than a January frost. No handshake, no warmth. He treated her presence like a misplaced heirloom, awkward, inconvenient. His kin followed like shadows turning away just as she neared, like sunlight revealing too much. Michael stiffened, his soul bristling beneath that tailored suit. But Evelyn's hand found his arm, steady, grounding. "They don't know yet," she whispered, "but they will." And oh, how they carried on. Every sneer was stitched into the air like bad embroidery. Chairs slid away as if her skin carried fire. Conversations clipped like broken wings. When she reached for a treat, Victoria curled her lips like Evelyn had reached for her pearls. Michael's heart shattered in silence. But Evelyn? She stood in that storm like a woman who danced in deeper hurricanes. What they didn't know, couldn't know, was that Evelyn Carter came from a long line of women who turned scorn into legend. And tonight, she wouldn't need to raise her voice to make the room tremble. The celebration raged on, champagne like rivers, laughter hollow and loud. Servants spun in silent duty, and the Montgomerys floated above it all, unaware that history had just pulled up a chair. Luxury dripped from every corner of the party, champagne and gold-rimmed flutes, string quartets playing Beyoncé like Bach. But beneath all that shine, the unmistakable stench of self-importance. Evelyn Carter sat at a lonely little table like a diamond buried in costume jewelry. Around her, nothing but air kisses and clout chasing. Olivia's relatives buzzed around the real celebrities like designer moths to a spotlight. A federal judge here, a fashion CEO there, some tech bro who invented an app to walk your dog by drone. The elite were fawned over like royalty. Evelyn, treated like a decorative centerpiece, pretty, polite, and entirely ignorable. At a nearby table, Victoria Montgomery gave her wine glass a dramatic swirl like she was auditioning for a villain role she already owned. She leaned in, her voice dipped in sugar and spite. Michael turned out quite well. All things considered, the considered wasn't lost on anyone. Evelyn looked up from her tea like she'd heard this line in 100 different accents over the years. Her silence was louder than applause. Michael heard it. His jaw did a full clench and release. He turned to Olivia, eyes sharp, waiting for her to say something. She didn't. Bride silence, conflict avoidance, lip-biting diplomacy. Evelyn touched his arm. Grandma-style force field. Don't. Not now. At another table, Richard Montgomery was working the crowd like a late-night host. Smooth voice, sharp suit, zero soul. He cracked a joke about traditions being passé. Everyone laughed like it was the Sermon on the Mount, and Evelyn caught the real punchline. People like you don't fit here. There are traditions, and then there are habits dressed up in pearls and passed off as class. The Montgomerys? Oh, they had habits, like ignoring the people who didn't fit their decor, like trimming the family tree to match their landscaping budget. Michael's fists sat clenched in his lap, not from fear, but from fury. His side of the family didn't wear rings to prove legacy. They wore names built on endurance, and sitting close by was the crown jewel of it all. Evelyn. No diamonds, no drama, just dignity, pressed and polished. Richard didn't even nod at her. That was his style. Respect is optional if you don't think someone earns it. Evelyn, though, please. She's danced through sharper rooms than this. She didn't fight the frost. She warmed it. When some silk-tied stranger complained about the stress of handling wealth, Evelyn tilted her head and said, "Real fortune's measured in how you speak when no one's watching." Someone made a snide remark about rags to riches stories. Evelyn didn't blink. "Funny thing," she said, "gold often starts as dust." The room barely caught her voice. But across the space, someone did. An older man, clean-cut, eyes like secrets wrapped in silence. He sat alone, glass untouched. His suit was modest. His presence was not. He watched the show, the performative cruelty, the choreographed snubs. He saw Evelyn standing still in a sea of shifting masks, and silently he noted, "That's the only real thing here." She caught him staring and tossed back a sly smile, the kind that says, "I've got the receipts." Evelyn Carter knew a storm was brewing, and she was the lightning. The Montgomerys, meanwhile, were too busy polishing their egos to notice the weather change. Mozart played like background noise in a tick-tock, clinks, giggles, and too many toasts. Everyone thought the show was over. Then came the mic tap. "Ladies and gents," the coordinator chirped, teeth gleaming with ambition, "please welcome tonight's VVIP, business mogul, philanthropist, social legend." Head snapped up. Olivia's family perked like houseplants after mist. Then he stood, Mr. Armani's suit with mystery eyes. He'd been lurking like the final twist in a Netflix series. Now he rose, and the whole garden tilted, except he didn't walk to the mic. Nope, he turned. Beeline straight for Evelyn. The silence? Delicious, like a mic drop from God. He stopped, bowed. "Madam Carter." Boom. That's how you shut down a snob fest. Evelyn, still seated, gave him the kind of smile you reserve for old friends and secret alliances. "William," she purred, "you still know how to make an entrance." Cue the collective Montgomery jaw drop, and somewhere an ego burst into flames. And then it clicked, like a group chat finding out the quiet kid's mom owns half the tech startups on the West Coast. William Carter wasn't just someone, he was the someone, billionaire, industrial disruptor, human LinkedIn flex. And guess who he was kneeling to? Yeah, the lady they all ghosted at the hors d'oeuvres table. Victoria's wine glass nearly launched into orbit. Richard's jaw lost its favorite party trick, smirking. Olivia looked like she'd been unplugged from the simulation. William lifted a hand like a TED Talk about to go viral. "You know me? Boardrooms, foundations, headlines." He turned, and boom, eye contact with Evelyn like they were co-authors in a book the rest of the room hadn't read. "But this woman, Evelyn Carter, is the blueprint." Gasps. Static. Micro-internalized crises all around. She didn't just climb the ladder, she melted it down and turned it into scholarships. She's been out here building legacies while y'all were busy comparing Teslas. Cue guilt, confusion. Some guests looked like their champagne had suddenly gone flat. William, cool as a billionaire cucumber. She changed lives, and tonight, maybe she just changed yours. Turns out the woman they'd treated like a misplaced coat at a high society gala was actually the architect of empires. She'd funded futures, shaped policy, mentored more CEOs than they'd invited to this wedding. And now the Montgomerys were realizing, far too late, that Evelyn Carter wasn't just someone. She was the one. Richard looked like a stock portfolio during a market crash, panicked and hollow. His entire existence was built on shaking the right hands, and he just snubbed the hand. Victoria tried a rebrand on the spot. "Oh, we had no idea," she chirped, half laughing, half choking on her privilege. Evelyn turned, regal, immovable. "I know," she said, just 2 syllables that could have been a mic drop at Davos. Michael straightened like a skyscraper getting its foundation back. That's his grandmother. And he wasn't hiding it anymore. Olivia? She looked like someone told her the wedding was actually a roast, and she was the main course. Once Evelyn was the woman who didn't belong. Now the Montgomerys were guests in a story that had never been theirs to headline. The glittering night kept moving, but something invisible had shifted. Eyes lingered longer. Conversations dropped to whispers, and Victoria, still clinging to her half-empty wine glass, was no longer the lady of the hour, but the punchline of the century. Richard, the man who thought he held the stars in his pocket, now stood as if lightning had split the sky and pointed right one at him. His world, a kingdom built on status, was crumbling in the presence of a queen he dared to ignore. Around them, murmurs moved like wind through stone. Some eyes watched her with reverence, others with shame, and a few, finally, with understanding. Michael stepped into the space between silence and reckoning. His voice rose not with rage, but with legacy. "Curious thing," he began, gazing into the heart of arrogance. "You've built lives on ladders, but you kicked at the one woman who became the staircase for thousands." They flinched, not from fear, but from truth that burned. "You mocked her stillness, but she's moved mountains. You questioned her presence, but she created presence." Olivia felt the earth shift beneath her. The illusion of superiority had cracked. Victoria reached out, voice trembling with false grace. "Evelyn, had we known—" But Evelyn raised her hand, not to silence, but to seal fate. "There was nothing to know," she said. And with those words, the old world ended. A new story began. Once there lived a couple who believed thrones were carved from gold, not honor. They measured souls by the weight of wallets, never by the weight of wisdom. So when the elder queen, unadorned but radiant, turned her back on the outstretched hand of the false king, no sword was drawn, and yet he fell. Richard's grin wilted like a flower in winter. Victoria, silenced by a truth she'd never studied, watched her kingdom crumble, quietly. Evelyn did not deliver revenge. She didn't demand repentance. She returned to her seat and took another bite of her cake, sweet as the justice around her. For that is power. Not the kind you parade in mansions, but the kind that holds its head high when others shrink in shame. And though the violins played and the wine still flowed, the air no longer obeyed the Montgomery name. Their magic had broken. They sat among guests who now saw them differently, stripped bare, revealed by their own hand. Victoria turned to catch a glimpse of Evelyn, laughing beside a man whose influence dwarfed theirs. And in that fleeting look, she saw it. Character is the crown they never wore. Evelyn carried herself with a grace no fortune could buy. Richard's jaw clenched tight, his eyes darting nervously as guests swarmed her like moths to a flame. The woman they dismissed, now the center of every conversation, every handshake. That sting, priceless. Olivia felt the squeeze of two worlds, the loyalty to her family versus the love she held for Michael. No more silence. Her voice trembled, soaked in regret. I should have said something sooner. Stop them. Michael's gaze locked on hers, steady, unflinching. He reached for her hand, warmth spreading. This isn't your burden alone. What counts is what comes next. Her grip hardened. I promise our union won't be built on blind ignorance, not on prejudice. Evelyn, overhearing, gave a knowing nod. Words aren't enough. Actions move mountains. Olivia nodded back, ready to fight. The night wrapped up, and the Montgomerys faded into the background, no longer kings of the hill. They'd been knocked down a peg. Whether they climbed back up, that was their story now. One thing was clear. Respect isn't bought. It's earned. And the one they overlooked? She owned the room tonight.